And today we only have one chapter, so we're going to leave early. Is that good?
Okay.
All right. From today on until chapter 17, it's one chapter a day only. Okay? This now starts getting a little complicated.
So,
Yeah, so now it's been easy. Piece of cake, right? Ella's trying all the seats in the house. Let's see what's the best position. $1 million seats in the front, just saying. Probably next door after, but $1 million seats. This is like being at the movies. Nobody wants to be in the front like this.
yeah, like that.
Yeah. All right, got 2 people watching from home. Whoever it is, just type 1 so I know who you are. If you have questions, please ask questions. And we're going to talk about real estate contracts today. Now, the first part of this is going to be contracts in general. So it's not just real estate, it's contracts in general and the rules of contract, okay? So, contract law, it says brokers and salespeople use many types of contracts and agreements in the course of their business to carry out their responsibilities to sellers, buyers, and the general public. Among these are listing agreements, sales contracts, option agreements, and leases. The general body of the law that governs the operations of such agreements is known as contract law. So like I said, we're talking about contracts in general. Contract law is where we start. And it says here, the very first thing is that a contract may be defined as a voluntary agreement between legally competent parties to perform or refrain from performing some legal act supported by legal evidence, or legal consideration, I'm sorry. So, contract may be defined as voluntary agreements between legally competent parties to perform or refrain, meaning stop from performing some legal act supported by legal consideration. Now, with that being said, we have essentials to contract on the next page. And what does that mean? Essential elements of a valid contract. It means that without these elements, these essential, these basics, do we have a contract? No. You understand? So you need to know these 4. Before I go over them, I want you to understand one thing. A signature is not always required, because we might have verbal contracts as well, or agreements. Does that make sense? Yes?
Yeah.
Perfect. So the first essential element for a valid contract is competent parties. What are competent parties? Well, to enter into a binding contract in New Jersey and most states, a person must be at least 18 years old and of sound mind. That means you are completely insane. Right? Insane, no? Sound mind, meaning you know when you recognize the acts that you're performing, that they are voluntary, that you're not being forced. Does that make sense? So you're of legal age, so 18 years or older, and competent, a sound mind. Now, the next 2 statements, I want to talk about them separately. The first one is, a married person under 18 is considered an adult. And you're probably wondering, married person under 18? Yeah. If you're 16 and you tell your parents, hey, I want to get married, and your parents allow it, it's called emancipation. You become an adult as soon as your parents sign that document, right? The problem is, what people don't realize is that once you sign that document, emancipation, you answer to everything as if you were an adult. You guys got it? So, the next thing that it says, that's why I want to make a separate statement here. The next thing that it says is persons under 18 may enter into a binding contract. Valid contract. But the contract is voidable by the minor until a reasonable time after he or she reaches the age of 18. These are 2 separate statements. In one of them, you're married, therefore you're an adult. In the other one, You are not married. You're under 18. You entered into a contract which you can void later. As an example, I always talk about how I have properties with my son. My son is 13 years old now. Can he become 18 years of age and say, Dad, you know what? Real estate is not for me. You keep the houses and I'll do something else. Can he do that? Can I force him to stay in a contract, in the deed? Because the deed is a contract. No. I cannot force. So his side of it is voidable. He can get out of it. You understand? So it's very important because there might be a question in the state exam that talks about a minor inheriting property and then trying to sell, as an example. If they're a minor and they enter into a contract, can they back out of the contract, void it? They can. You guys got it? But if he's married, if it says married, can he back out of the contract? No. Married persons are treated as adults. Okay? Next. Offer and acceptance. So Ella, if I offer something to you and you don't accept, can I force it?
I'm supposed to say no.
Correct. That's correct. I cannot force it. It's not valid. So unless there's offer and acceptance, do we have a contract? Can it be enforced? No. All right, so these are the terms of the contract. For instance, when you guys signed up for the class, we gave you the terms of the contract. It was explained to you, and you signed. Right? But if you did not agree to the terms, could I say sign? No, I cannot force you to anything. It has to be a free voluntary act and a complete understanding, right, of all the terms of the contract. So offer and acceptance, also called mutual assent or meeting of the minds, means we agree to all the terms of a contract. We are in agreement, therefore voluntarily act. Okay? Number 3, consideration. Where it says consideration, we're talking about exchange of value. I'm giving you a house. What are you giving me in return? I'm selling you a house. What are you giving me in return? Stuff like that. Does that make sense? Consideration means there's something in exchange. So the agreement must be based on good or valuable consideration. And consideration is what the parties promise in the agreement to give to or receive from each other. Consideration may consist of legal tender, exchange of value, or love and affection. Love and affection, so you squinted. Love and affection is this. I told you that my son is owner of a property. What kind of consideration did he put in to be part of that? All the love and affection he has for me, of course. Right? Until he's 18 and says, please, Dad, get out. But love and affection. Now look what it says. It says the price or amount must be definitely stated and payable in exchange for the deed or right received. In a sales contract, please highlight, underline, with stars, arrows, bubbles, whatever you have to put. You have to remember, in a sales contract, the consideration is the entire sales price. You need to remember that. Number 4. You guys good so far? Competent parties, offer and acceptance, and now consideration. The final one is Lucilma's getting nervous now.
No, it's hot.
She's like, we're going to talk about legality? Legal stuff?
I
don't-
like.
You like it? Like, I thought you were taking it, like, oh my God, you have to do this thing the legal way?
I work in a law department in Brazil.
Okay, you work in a law department?
I like.
So you were the one scamming everybody with all the money from the, what do you call it? Lava Jato, right? Mm-hmm. Wasn't that what it's called? The bust, the big bust that they made on all the politicians. She was the one helping them move the money. All right, legality of the object. We're talking about legal purpose. To be valid and enforceable, a contract must not involve a purpose that is illegal or against public policy. So, Lucilma, since you were in the law department, I'm going to give you $1 million. Good so far? $1 million. She's smiling. She's happy. All right. I'm going to give you $1 million to sell Coke. Is that okay?
I hope so.
You hope so?
I hope not.
Make sure your cell phones are on silent, not on vibrate, please. You hope so? It's legal to give you $1 million to sell Coke?
Not Coca-Cola. Oh no, I thought Coca-Cola.
No, that's what
She's like,
She turned deep red. I was talking about Coca-Cola. I don't know what you guys thinking about, but Lucy's like, if you ask me.
We have a deal.
We have a deal. So what was I saying? So I give you $1 million to sell Coke. If it's the right type of Coke, the Coca-Cola, right? Because nobody ever, I mean, I've never heard anybody say this. And I worked in restaurant business. So I never heard anybody come to the restaurant and say, hey, can I have a Coca-Cola? No. They always say, can I have a Coke? Right? Even in Portuguese and in Spanish, they say Coca. They never say the whole thing. Right? So, $1 million to sell Coke. As long as it's the right type of Coke, it's a legal purpose, it's okay. If it's the type of Coke that Lucia was talking about, then it's illegal. Do we have a contract though? No, because one of the essential elements is missing or broken. You guys understand? There's 4 essential elements. What are the 4 essential elements? Competent parties, offer and acceptance, consideration, and legal purpose or legality of the object. You guys got it? Yes? As I mentioned earlier, did we talk about being in writing? Did we talk about signatures as a requirement? Did we? In these 4 essential elements, did we talk about that? No. So, it says right here, a valid contract may be oral or written. Oral or written. That means it doesn't have to be in writing in order to be enforceable. Correct? The parole evidence rule, however, states that written contracts take precedence over oral agreements or promises. So, Lucilma, I promised you $1 million to sell Coke, didn't I? Coca-Cola. We're good. I promised you $1 million to sell Coke. Oh, he's back.
good morning.
Good morning. We thought he had said only one victor in this class or something. All right. So, parole evidence rule, however, states that written contract takes precedence over oral agreements or promises. So it has to be verbal or written, but if you put it in writing, whatever we said, right, is not as enforceable as something that's in writing. Now, Lucilma,
Yes.
again, I gave you $1 million to sell Coke.
Yeah.
Victor walks into the Coke. So, $1 million to sell Coke. We're talking about the right type of Coke before you say anything else. Even though Lucia, she was talking about the other type of Coke. The kind that makes it snow and stuff. Alright. So, $1 million sell quote. But that's verbal agreement. Is it valid? Yeah, we just said yes. But I decided to put it in writing. Right? Obviously, it's $1 million, let's put on paper. And on paper, I forgot a zero. But Lucilma's all excited because I promised her $1 million. What is she going to do? She's going to sign blindly without seeing it. Right? So you didn't see the zero is missing. Thank you. And coffee has arrived if anybody wants coffee. The creamers are in the fridge. Unfortunately, he's dressed as a butler, but he won't serve. Thank you, Peter. So, I forgot a zero. How much am I paying you for what I promised?
That is in the paper.
Whatever's in the paper, which is
Yes.
$100,000.
Right?
Can you come after the 900 that I had promised you verbally?
No, because it's in writing.
All right. So whatever's in writing goes. That's it.
Unless you have like some sort of recording. Will that work?
We're getting somewhere. Not the recording, but we're getting somewhere.
Alright.
Statute of frauds. New Jersey Statute of Frauds states that a contract for sale of real estate and any lease for more than 3 years must be in writing and signed in order to be enforceable. But, look what it says. Every rule has what? An exception. So the New Jersey Statute of Frauds was changed so that it allowed oral contracts to be enforced where there is clear and convincing evidence. That the buyer and seller had agreed orally on the exact real estate to be transferred, the nature of the interest to be transferred, right hand side on top, the existence of the agreement, and the identity of the transferee. So if you have proof somehow that Lucilma, we had agreed on $1 million, but I'm only paying you 100. If you have proof somehow, some type of evidence, right, like witnesses, something that implies or expresses that I did promise you the $1 million, right? Then you have some type of recourse. You can come after. You guys understand?
Mm-hmm.
But if there's nothing, then what's on paper is what matters. So, to protect yourselves, you should always have what?
Everything on paper.
Everything on paper. Witnesses. You're going to drag somebody with you?
I always do it, yeah.
Hmm?
I always do it,
You always have witnesses?
yeah. You don't know what's up there.
So who's your witness here?
Well,
They're all against you, though. In the end, there can only be one victor.
see, almost got that.
He was all happy. Like, yes, it's only me. All right. Now, while licensees should be aware of this situation, it would be extremely risky to rely on the validity of oral contracts for sale or long-term lease of the real estate. To do so would be inviting litigation. So if you're trying to put things orally only and still try to collect commission, yeah, you're going to be fighting for it. So, real estate broker's authorization, because of this, must be in writing and signed for either the sale or lease transaction, whether the broker is acting on behalf of the seller, the buyer, the landlord, or the tenant. So it doesn't matter who you represent, everything should be or must be in writing. If you want to get paid, of course. Not then it's whatever. Why would you get paid for this service, right?
For labor.
Make sure your phones are on silent, please, not on vibrate. I appreciate it. Free labor, love it. All right, types of contracts. Now, depending on the situation and nature or language of the agreement, a contract may be expressed or implied, unilateral or bilateral, executory or executed, and valid, unenforceable, voidable, or void. Let's start with expressed and implied contracts. So depending on how a contract is created, it may be expressed or implied. In an express contract, the parties state the terms and show their intentions in words. An express contract may be either oral or written. In an implied contract, the agreement of the parties is demonstrated by their acts or conduct. For instance, when you guys sign up for this class, we expressed that you needed to complete 75-hour course. We expressed that you cannot miss more than 10%, so you have to complete 90% of the course. We expressed that you need to do a background check. We expressed that you have to be 18 years of age or older. All that is expressed. The hours, that there was going to be somebody teaching, all that is expressed in that agreement. Does that make sense? Now, what's implied, right? It's implied that you're going to be here on time. It's implied that you're going to be paying attention. It's implied that when you go home, you study. Does that make sense? It doesn't say anywhere, hey, you have to be on time. Hey, you have to pay attention. It doesn't say anywhere. On day one, I did that in the PowerPoint, right? Even though it's implied. But those are implied. It's based on actions. Because me just standing here and teaching means nothing if you don't take certain actions. That's implied on you. Does that make sense? Yes? So here another example is the patron who orders a meal in a restaurant has implied the promise to pay for the food or run away as fast as he can, one or the other. In an agency relationship, a listing agreement is an express contract between the principal, which is buyer or seller, and the broker that names the broker as the principal's fiduciary representative. Next we have bilateral and unilateral contract. According to the nature of the agreement made, contracts may be classified as either bilateral or unilateral. Before we move forward, lateral means side. If it's unilateral, it's one-side agreement. If it's bilateral, it's two-sided agreement. You got it? So, in a bilateral contract, both I need my coffee. Hold on a second. Brain's not functioning. Got it. In a bilateral contract, both parties promise to do something, and one promise is given in exchange for another. So a real estate sales contract is a bilateral contract because the seller promises to sell and the buyer promises to buy. Simple as that. And both parties take positive steps towards the consummation of the transaction. Does that make sense? Questions so far? So it says, I will do this and you will do that. So both of us must do something towards it. Okay? Next, a unilateral contract. I said it's one-sided agreement. A unilateral contract, on the other hand, is a one-sided agreement whereby one party makes a promise to induce the second party to do something. So the second party is not legally obligated to act. However, if the second party does comply, the first party is obligated to keep the promise. Right? So the example they have here, I'm going to give you a real estate example in a second. But the example they have here is an offer of a reward is an example of a unilateral contract. Under this agreement, a law enforcement agency offers a monetary payment or reward to anyone who can aid in the capture of a criminal. I will do this if you'll do that. Look what I have highlighted. I will do this if you'll do that. So only if someone does aid in the capture is the reward paid. It's not like you call the cops and say, hey, I'm about to witness a crime. Where's my money? Right? If you're about to witness a crime, I'm pretty sure you're the criminal. Right? You're going to say, hey, I just witnessed a crime. It was this person, such and such. If they get captured, you get your reward. Got it? Now, in real estate, Have you guys ever heard of rent to own? Right? Or lease with option to buy? We find it a lot in cars, car lease. It's the same thing, it's a rent to own. You get to test drive the car or the house, and after a certain period of time, you have the option of buying. Now you have the option. You don't have to buy. But if you do exercise the option, then the seller is obligated to sell. Does that make sense? So an option agreement is a unilateral contract. It's not binding on the buyer, it's binding on the seller. And if the buyer does buy, the seller must sell. You guys got it? Yes? Questions? No?
Would you, in the case you do something like that, would you specify the price of the sale prior to the agreement, or you gotta wait until see what's the market at that time?
So think about car leases. Did you ever lease a car?
Yeah.
Okay. So what they tell you is they'll let you rent a car for 3 years, and then you have the option of paying an X amount or whatever the car value is, the difference between the car value at the time, right, and whatever you pay. Right? Those are the two options, one or the other. Right? So if you pay a fixed amount of dollars, you're paying already based on the future price. We're agreeing, hey, today, that's what the car is going to be worth, so this is what you're going to pay for the option. Right? Or you're going to go for the difference, whichever is lower. So when you rent a house, you're saying, hey, the property worth $300,000 today, based on projections, just like in the cars, based on projections. 3 years from now, the house is going to be worth X. So the purchase agreement is based on X, not based on today.
Okay.
Just like in the cars, it's not based on today. It's based on the valuation of the car over time. In this case, it's based on the increase of value over time. You got it? Next. Executed and executory contracts. Executed. Right above executed, I want you to write finished. Right above executory, I want you to write pending. So what does this mean, executed and pending? A contract may be classified as either executed or pending depending on whether the agreement is completely performed. So a fully executed contract is one in which both parties have fulfilled their promises and thus performed the contract. We closed. Does that make sense? So finished, closed, done. An executory contract exists when something remains to be done by one or both parties. So it's pending, right? A real estate sales contract is executory before final settlement. After the closing, it's an executed contract. So it's very simple. I put an offer on your house, Victor L. Don't want to confuse them. Right? I put an offer on your house. And when I put an offer, I say that we're going to close in the next 3 months, so 90 days. During the period of time from the offer till the closing, 90 days later, the contract is executory, it's pending. It's pending certain actions from the buyer, mortgage and all the inspections and all that stuff, and from the seller, the CO, clearing title, all that good stuff, right? So it's pending from the offer till closing. We get to the day of closing, we exchange the check for the keys, right? We now have closed. So it's executed, our contract. Does that make sense? Questions? No? Good. Because there's also a second meaning to the term executed. And it applies to contracts themselves, to the paper, to the documents. See, an executed contract is one that is signed. Until then, it's a blank piece of paper. It has stuff typed, but it means nothing. Once you sign, you agree to the terms within the contract. So you executed the contract. If both parties sign, then it becomes a fully executed contract. You guys got it? So there's two meanings to execute it. One is we finished, we closed, whatever was pending. The other one is the document itself is signed, it became executed. You guys got it? Now, validity of contracts. A contract can be described as valid, void, voidable, or unenforceable. A valid contract contains all essential elements and is binding on and enforceable by both parties. What are the essential elements of a valid contract? Essential elements of a valid contract.
Bilateral?
Say louder.
Bilateral?
Bilateral, no. Bilateral, no.
The four elements that we just went over.
I don't know. Maybe. Tell me. Are you asking me or are you telling me?
They
Competent parties,
like
Say louder. No.
Okay.
competent parties, offer and acceptance.
Wait, you're reading?
I can't remember all the things. We just went over it.
We just went over it. That's my point. Guys, look to the left on your book. It's right there on top. Essential elements of a valid contract. Competent parties, offer and acceptance, consideration, and legal purpose. If you guys don't remember from one page to another, imagine what happens if you don't review at home. You got it? It's very, very important. I usually use this right here as like a, hey, wake up. It's very, very important that you guys review at home. If you don't, it's going to be difficult because it's a lot of terms. And if you're not involved in real estate, yeah, it's going to be very difficult. It's a lot of terms. It's an easy exam. It's an easy course compared to certain courses that I've had. But if you don't study, yeah, it's going to be a problem. Okay? So, essential elements. You got to remember always, there's only 4, and signature is not one of them. It doesn't have to be signed because there could be verbal or written contracts. So, signature is not essential. What is the essential? What are the basics? Competent parties, offer and acceptance, consideration, and legal purpose. Okay? That makes a contract valid. What do you think makes a contract void? If a valid contract contains all 4 essential elements, a void contract is
It's got to be missing at least one of them.
at least one of them. Correct. You guys got it? To be valid, you need all essential elements. To be void, meaning doesn't mean anything, it's missing one of the elements. Okay? What about voidable contract? What about voidable contracts?
I mean, you specify in the contract that if something that's met certain criteria, you can, void it or cancel it. Could be something like that.
Okay. So it's voidable because, for instance, they were not a competent party. For instance, like minors. Okay. So it says right here, a contract entered into with a minor usually is voidable. Okay. Now, what if the minor was married? Then they can't void the contract because they are considered adults. So I'm just going back to what we were saying before you came in. All right? Because if they're married, right, emancipation, then they are considered adults. Okay? Next, an unenforceable contract. An unenforceable contract also seems on the surface to be valid. However, neither party can successfully sue the other party to force performance. So we got into a valid contract, but I cannot enforce it, and you cannot enforce it. An unenforceable contract is said to be as valid as between the parties, because if both desire to go through with it, they can do so. For example, Victor and Victor decided to go out for drinks. Huh? You don't drink?
Not gonna be good.
Oh, not going to be good? Two Victors going out for drinks is not good? I don't know. Is there something about Victors? I didn't get that one. So Victor and Victor, you guys go out for drinks. And you're selling your property, right? And he goes, I want to buy a house.
I told you it was not gonna be good.
See? I want to buy a house. But they had drinks. He signs it, and he's under the influence, right? Because he's not only going to be drunk, he's also drunk on medication because of the flu. So
See?
all this, yeah, it's going to be really bad. So he decides to buy, Victor B decides to buy Victor L's house. Because, now it gets confusing, the Victors. Because he was not a competent party, right? Can Victor L enforce the purchase? No. But next day, Victor B, you sobered up. You call Victor L and go like, hey, did I sign a contract last night? Because the party was rocking. I don't remember anything. I think I signed something. Right? And Victor says, yeah, you did. And we're going to move forward, right? If he, after sobering up, if both the parties decide to go through with it, can they?
Yes.
Absolutely. So that's the only thing. While under the influence, this contract might be valid, but not enforceable. Next day, if one of the parties wants to back out of the deal, they can. And the other party cannot enforce. You guys understand? If they both decide to go through with it, well, the contract is valid between the parties. So if they decide to go through with it, it's okay. And this applies to a lot of stuff, right? Not only for alcohol. In fact, contracts signed by a person under duress, meaning being forced into it, or under the influence, being taken advantage of, are voidable and unenforceable. So may be canceled by such person or by a court. In fact, realtors, extreme care should be taken, make sure you're paying attention to this, extreme care should be taken when one or more parties to a contract is elderly, sick, in great distress, or under the influence of drugs or alcohol. It's a one-way ticket for you to lose your license. Even though most great deals happen over a cup of wine, right, as an example, right? Most great deals do happen that way. But you have to be careful because the other party can always rescind, void, or cancel that contract. Okay? To be valid, please highlight, underline, put stars. Every contract must be signed as the free, voluntary act of each party. You guys good? I'm going to go as slow as I can in this chapter. Performance of a contract. Occasionally, a contract may call for a specific time at or by which the agreed on acts must be completely performed. In addition, many contracts provide that time is of the essence. What does that mean? It means that we scheduled 90 days, right? Victor, when I put an offer on your property, I said it was 90 days for us to close. So, time is of the essence. This means that the contract must be performed within this time limit, and any party who has not performed on time is guilty of a breach of contract. Now, Victor, you're the seller. I'm the buyer. We're 1 week away from the closing dates that we projected. But Victor did not yet obtain the CO, Certificate of Occupancy. Does anybody know how long it takes roughly to get a CO?
30 days.
Not 30 days, but it could take 2 to 3 weeks. 2 to 3 weeks. We're a week away from the projected date of closing. Are we closing? No, most likely not. So my attorney will send a letter to your attorney that says, hey, time is of the essence. We agreed to close by the, let's say it's next week, so the 17th. We agreed to close by the 17th. Your party, so your client, the seller, still does not have the CO. You are technically in breach of the contract. So here's what my client is willing to do. So they're saying that the buyer is willing to give you another 2 weeks on top of that. So instead of the 17th, we're going to close 2 weeks later. So now you have a total of 3 weeks, Victor, to get the CO. After that period of time, because you are in breach of the contract, what can I do? I can walk away without any problems after me. Because here's the thing, after the 3rd business day, the contract is binding. You guys remember that, 3 business days? After the 3rd business day, the contract is binding. So I cannot back out of the deal. But if he screws up, because he's not doing what he's supposed to do, I'll back out of the deal. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. What recourse do I have? What can I do? Because he breached the agreement, not me. You guys got it? So time is of the essence. It's forcing the other party to speed up the process. Next, we have assignment and novation. So, what did I say? I said I put an offer on your property. Let's go back to this example. So, Victor, I put an offer on your property, but then, I don't know, 2 weeks later, something happened in my life and I cannot move forward. He can sue me unless I have a legal excuse. Right? So, because I don't have a legally acceptable excuse, what I can do is potentially find somebody else to take over. So, Lucy, I got this great deal. It's a 2-family, 3-bedroom, 2-bath in each unit, right? But I already have it under contract, but I cannot move forward right now. Something happened in my life and I cannot move forward. Would you be interested in this deal? Right? So here's what happened. Victor, under the terms of our contract, I'm entitled to assign the contract. That means I'm transferring the rights or duties to Lucy. So now who's buying your house? She is. Good so far? I transferred or flipped the contract to her. This is called wholesaling. I put in the contract, but then I flipped to somebody else. You guys good so far? The problem with assignments that people don't understand when they do this wholesaling thing or flipping thing. The problem with contracts is if Lucy cannot buy or does not buy or backs out of the deal, Victor here can come after Lucy. That's normal, right? But because I was the original party and I transferred to Lucy, I assigned to Lucy, right? Victor can sue me as well. So both of us get sued. The person that was originally going to buy and the person to whom I transferred the rights. Did you guys understand that? In an assignment or transfer of rights, there's always assignor, assignee. Assignor maintains secondary liability if the assignee breaches the contract. So both of us get sued. Remember that. Now, do you guys think that I want that type of liability? If there's a reason why I gave it to you, Lucy, right? You're buying, not me, right? So if I want to back out of the deal and have no issues whatsoever, we need something called novation. Novation is a brand new contract because nova means new. So novation is a brand new contract between the parties in this case. So there's a substitution of the parties or novation of the parties. So instead of being me buying, she's buying. But the difference between novation and assignment, the only difference is that in case of novation, the old contract no longer has any force. So Victor, L, if she defaults, if she does not pay, can you come after me as well?
No.
No. Questions? Have you heard of those things on the radio? New Jersey is the perfect market to do real estate, my simple steps, whatever. Yeah? And you go to these events, come down to my free event, I'm going to teach you all about real estate.
Which seminars and stuff.
Yeah, totally fine, nothing wrong with that. Actually, some of them I actually look up to, right? All right, there's a phone vibrating somewhere. Who's this? Is yours?
I don't know how.
That Apple phone, I know.
Are you keeping my
Not
card
on the chair,
tomorrow?
not on the chair,
Yeah, it's in under my.
not on,
My
don't put it on the
jacket.
chair, on top of your jacket.
So, right next to the water bin in the back,
Tomorrow, keeping my card.
right next to the water in the back, there's a bucket. No,
Sorry.
but it is you, Lucille?
What to say?
It is you?
I think. Sorry. I promise.
All right. So, change phones. It's quick, like a few seconds. Over at Verizon or Sprint.
No,
or-
it's all the time people want to sell. All the time.
All right. Anyway, so I was talking about the events. In these events, they teach you about real estate, the ways that you can buy real estate. There's 3 ways. There's only 3 ways, right? One of them is wholesaling, which is this: you buy and flip the contract. The other one is buy, fix, and flip, and the other one is buy and hold. 3 ways to get into real estate. That's it. There's no other way that I know about, at least. And I've been around the block, but I think those are the 3 ways. The rent to own. I'm sorry. So wholesaling, which is buying and flipping a contract. You have the rehab, which is the buy, fix, and flip. And then you have the buy and hold, which buy and hold could be through, all of these could be through rent with option to buy or straight purchase. But anyway, bottom line is you go to these events, they teach you a bunch of stuff, but it's all condensed. If it's already bad going from one page to another, imagine 1 day or 3 days packed with information. What do you know when you get out of there? Absolutely nothing. But you feel like a superhero because now you learn about real estate. I can do this, right? And then all of a sudden, with the little information that you caught from the whole 3-day presentation, you get involved in wholesaling, which is the cheapest, easiest way to get into real estate. The first step, which is flipping contracts. The problem is, what I always tell people, is that they briefly touch it in these seminars. But you don't want to flip the contract to somebody that needs a mortgage. Because if I needed a mortgage as well, and you need a mortgage, if I don't qualify and you don't qualify, we're both stuck. So when you get into wholesaling or flipping contracts, what you should have is somebody that is a cash buyer. Somebody that is almost guaranteed that will buy. Does that make sense? Because I want to make sure if I assign those rights to you or duties to you, right, I want to make sure that you're going to buy Victor's property. And Victor's not going to sue me in the process. Does that make sense? You don't flip to people that need financing. And everybody says they're a cash buyer, by the way. That's the other thing. You guys are going to learn quickly as you get into this real estate business. Hey, I'm an investor. Like, great. How much cash do you have? Right? What are you looking for? I'm looking up to $500,000, or you know what? Whatever you get me, up to $1 million is fine. This guy's loaded, right? And then you find him something. We put it on the contract. So we're gonna close what, in 2 weeks? Because you got cash? Oh no, you see, I have a hard money lender that's gonna give me money, and then, like, wait a minute, you said you had cash. Why don't you say up front that you're looking to finance? You just have to tell me what kind of financing it was, and I would understand your process. It's a big difference. Because if it's your cash, right, you're the one approving it. And I'm all for it. Even if you have the cash, get a loan. I'm all for it. And I'll explain that better later on. But if you say you're going to buy cash, that means you're the decision maker. If you're pending a private loan or hard money loan or bank loan, then they're the decision maker. Does that make sense? So it changes everything. Right here, whoever put it under contract just got stuck because they cannot flip it to somebody that needs a loan. Either you have cash or you don't. Got it? So wholesaling, if you ever get involved in this, my first tip to you, and the best tip that you can ever get, is always, always, always find cash buyers. Okay?
How do you avoid that though? Like just getting somebody who tells you who has cash and at the end doesn't?
Show me the money. If you don't have the money,
Account?
show me your bank account. Simple. You want to make it solid? You want to be serious about this? Yeah. Put everything in escrow with a title company. It's guaranteed closing now. The money is set aside for this purpose only. Because I can show you as many bank statements as you want. You want me to add a zero to it? I will. Now there's so many products out there. Adobe PDF, right? There's Simple PDF. There's a PDF creator online. And you can create your own bank statements. It means nothing to me. So yes, if you want to make it even more solid, could you please wire that money to the escrow account? I just want to make sure you're serious about what we do. The escrow account is yours, right? I mean, it's through your title company, but at least it gives me and the seller a guarantee that the money's there. Absolutely. Yes.
How is it a good thing, the buying, fixing, flipping the house?
If it's a good thing, it's a great thing.
Yeah.
Any type of real estate investment is great.
Because I'm just like, for my own, you know.
No, I got it. All right, so this is a salesperson class, but any type of real estate investing is great. Flipping contracts, buying, fixing, and flipping, or buy and hold. They're all great. The question is numbers. If you're not good at math, don't do this. Find somebody, if you got the money and you're not good at math, find somebody that's good with the math. Because to me, it's all about numbers. If numbers don't make sense, doesn't matter how pretty the house is, doesn't matter where it's located, if the numbers don't make sense, don't do it. There are some people that keep on insisting on certain properties and certain numbers. Like, no. It's not worth it. I'll explain that better another time. So back to this. I just wanted to give a heads up because there's so much advertisement on TV and on the radio. They even mail stuff to your house. Hey, we're coming to your area. Meet us. Here's free tickets. Meet us at the, whatever, by the airport, right? The Marriott or the Hilton, whatever, by the airport. Just meet us over there this weekend for free. And then you're there and you get shoved down your throat a bunch of info that you don't even know what to do with. That's my fear. I was part of that. Like I got involved in so many events in the beginning, and I wasted a lot of money, including Trump University. Anyway. I think my very first investing book was the The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump. I mean, by John whatever. The ghostwriter, the guy that wrote the book. Anyway, different story.
How was the book?
I'm sorry?
How was the book?
It was small.
Informational?
Oh, okay. So information, yes. How can I put this? With the whole Trump University thing, to give you the example of the book, the whole Trump University thing, it was never Trump speaking. So it was the experience of a bunch of people, but never the guy. And that's the thing that upset me the most about being part of it. And when I found out that the book was not written by him either, right? It got me very upset because I wasted a lot of money for no apparent reason. And all the stuff that I got, I could have gotten, even back then, I could have gotten online. So I was very upset about that. And then one of the good things about him is that I understood from that point on what marketing was a hype. It's the McDonald's theory, which is, here's the burger, right? Do you want the fries and Coke? Do you want the fries and Coke with it? Like the deal?
Yeah.
That's what it is. They keep on adding value to it, and you keep on buying. So something you started off with $197, $20,000 later, in a weekend, $20,000 later, you got the package deal. But now that you're in it, do you want the full experience? It's another $50,000 and another, So
So what happened to you?
I'm sorry. Well, 15 years later, over $200,000 worth in courses later, yeah, I'm good. I just wish I didn't spend the initial 50. Well, close to 50. But everything else has been very good through the courses that I've got. Anyway, don't get involved in those things. Yes.
Besides this book, do you recommend any other books for real estate?
Besides which book?
Besides this book, the textbook, do you recommend another book?
Right now, like this textbook that we're using, this one?
Yeah.
Right now, no. Don't recommend anything else. I will recommend a few books for you to read after. So when we get to chapter 17, I will talk about 2 books that I want you to read, but after you get your license. And it's not directly about real estate, but it's about investing in yourself and growing. And one of the things that he talks about is real estate. Okay. Anyway, you have to understand, you have to be focused on one thing. I have a lot of students. I have right now over 2,000 students. No, close to 2,000 students that I've taught over the past 4 years. Okay, just for pre-licensing. Many of them got lost in these events that I'm talking about. They go to the Fortune Builders event. They go to the Flip This whatever event. They go to the Flip That whatever event. They go to Real Estate is Easy events. They get into these books, the other book, and then all of a sudden, they don't do anything as investors. They don't do anything as salespeople. So my recommendation is focus on this, finish this, then you can do everything else. Or focus on the investments and forget this until later. One or the other. Once you master one thing, you can get into the other. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay? Now, next page. Breach of contract. So if somebody defaulted in the contract, breach of contract. A breach of contract is a violation, so underlying violation, of any of the terms or conditions of a contract without legal excuse. Without legal excuse. So the buyer or the seller just fall off their bed and decide not to buy or sell that day? Not a legal excuse. All right? So, if the seller defaults, if the seller decides not to sell, the buyer has 3 options. They can either rescind or cancel the contract and recover the earnest money deposit. The buyer may file a court suit known as action for specific performance to force the seller to perform the contract. Or the buyer may sue the seller for compensatory damages. Compensation. Okay? These are the options. If the seller decides not to sell, the buyer has these options. If the buyer is the one that defaults, if the buyer is the one that says, I'm not buying anymore, the seller has the same three options plus one. The very first one here. The seller may declare the contract forfeited, and the right to forfeit may be provided for in the contract and according to the terms of the contract. The seller may be entitled to retain the earnest money and all payments received from the buyer as liquidated damages. What I was saying here? Very simple. When I put an offer into a house, I put $1,000 as an example. Okay? 3 business days later, after attorney review, I put another $4,000. How much is in escrow right now? $5,000. And the earnest money is also called a good faith deposit. Why good faith? Because if I back out of the deal for no reason, the seller can keep that money. Okay? And that's what it says here. They can keep those $5,000 as liquidated damages. In front of it, I want you to write settlement. They're going to keep that money as a settlement. Okay? On the right-hand side on top, I want you to go to where it says statute of limitations. It says right here, New Jersey allows a specific time limit of 6 years in which the parties to a contract may bring legal suits to enforce their rights. Any party who does not take steps to enforce his or her rights within the statute of limitations may lose those rights. The 6-year period applies to contracts, foreclosures, mortgages, and cases of fraud. Okay? So 6 years. We mentioned 6 years several times in the beginning. That's the statute of limitations. We get into a contract today. We close. For the next 6 years, if there's anything that I find out during the 6 years that are pertaining to what you did as a seller or as a realtor or as an attorney or whatever within the contract, I can still sue for compensation. Beyond the 6 years, there's nothing I can do. But lawsuits to recover property, to get property back, have a 10-year statute of limitations in New Jersey. So if I want to get my property back, 10 years. That's the statute of limitations. Let me just see something real quick. All right.
Might as well turn it off.
Yeah. All right, right here where it says preparation of documents, I'm going to give you guys a quick break. Okay? Brief break, and we come right back to do the second part of this. And maybe one of you iPhone experts can help Lucilma put her phone on silent, please.
It is.
No, it's on vibrate.
Go to settings.